Afternoon, Boston Buddies. Welcome to Brunch with Boston Buddies. This is Thursday. We're welcoming back our panel. We're doing a little bit of magic here. We're doing this on Sunday night. um, Again, we have four-time Boston Marathon champion and four-time New York City Marathon champion, Boston Billy Rodgers. Hello again.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Look good.
I'm sorry, I saw a message on my screen. It said your internet connection is unstable. As long as it wasn't personal, I'll take that all right.
And then we also have Natalie Dorsett again. Hello, Natalie. Welcome back.
Hi, Vince. Hello, Boston Buddies.
And Ian Eckersley all the way from Australia. How are you, Ian?
Yeah, brilliant, Vince, Natalie, Bill. Morning time here in Brisbane, and great to reconnect with Boston Buddies all the way from Australia. All
right. Well, thank you, everybody. We're going to continue on with the conversation that we had from Monday, but we're going to start on a separate topic, somewhat running related. Recently, obviously, there was some tragedy that happened in the running world, where a runner, an African American runner, running unarmed, was killed by two men. His name was Ahmaud Arbery, and that spun the I Run with Maud movement. I know a lot of the runners in our group did the run that day, the 2.33 miles, I think it was.
2.23.
Yes. We had a lot of runners run that day. We had a lot of runners post. We hadn't talked about it yet. I was trying to let it cool down a little bit and then talk to some people that have some experience with this and some personal connections with this. So I did want to start with that subject. I know, Natalie, this is near and dear to your heart. And I wanted to just see how you were doing and how you felt about that story when you heard what happened.
Well, it's interesting because this story was sort of floating around in African American media long before it was, started becoming broadly known on, Facebook and etc. Once the footage was seen. So it's something that people had been aware of and was sort of waiting and waiting and waiting for something to happen. And then it was a couple of months from the time he was killed in February 23rd, until there was actually an arrest, like last weekend. They arrested two people involved. But I think, sadly, it's not a one-off. Sadly, stuff like this happens a bit. I think it resonates with a lot of people we know because he was running. And to a lot of us, that's something that we just so take for granted, that you can sort of step outside and go for a run and not have to think about it. But when you're in a brown skin, it's something we do think about, It's like, so it resonated a lot with the running community broadly, but also within the African American running community, because we know that when we go out, we are mindful of where we are, what our surroundings are, and how we're going to be received. Like if I go out, I make sure I look like a runner. If I'm down in Delaware, or if I'm out in Utah or someplace where people aren't used to someone that looks like me necessarily, I make sure I'm in my brightest running skirt. I have a Camelback on. I have, every running gadget you can think of. And I make sure that I'm very obviously running, and I wave and smile at anyone that passes. I wave and smile just because you don't know, are they going to perceive me as a threat? And it's, as a Black woman, it's bad enough. I can't imagine it's much more magnified as a Black male, because for some reason, even though we're just all the same, right? We're all the same as people, somehow we're seen as threatening. It's almost like if you don't know someone that looks like me, if you see someone that looks like me, you're going to be fearful, even though my actions don't necessarily give you cause to be fearful. Just my mere existence can cause fear. And as a runner, it's a very hard thing to be aware of. I think a lot of runners, female runners, understand being mindful when they run, because you might be, somebody else's prey for another reason. But I think a lot of runners hadn't thought of what it is to run in a brown skin, and that we're very aware that that it's almost like I read an article recently that said running is what gave him respectability.
Mhm.
But we should be able to not just because people are like, oh, he was doing something that we understand, but we should just be able to walk, run, do what have you. Like we shouldn't have to be a perfect victim with no errors in our past for people to care if we're prey. And I think the running community is awake now, and it's a good opportunity because we need allies, right? It's like there've been people out there sort of protesting and doing stuff for a while, but unless we have allies that don't look like us, it's not going to move forward, So I believe a lot of runners are aware now, and maybe runners can start the conversation, and we can figure out what actions can we take to help, help keep a light shining on this so that it doesn't keep happening,
Yeah, I agree. I think having conversations like this help. Just hearing your perspective. It's the first time I've talked to you about this. The first time I've heard your perspective on that. It's things I've never even thought of. Having to be the perfect victim. That's not something anybody should really have to think about at all. It's disheartening to hear that.
I mean, don't you think Vince and Ian and Natalie, they're, I've been going to road races a long time, and I haven't seen as many. Of course, we all know that there's not as many African American runners out there into the road racing world, but I've seen runners through my lifetime who were African American, starting with someone like Ted Corbett, of course, a great ultra runner and Olympian. So, and my roommate at Wesleyan was a black guy, interestingly enough, but I think, when I go to the races, sometimes I'll meet an African-American person at a race and everything, but they're not there in that big of numbers. But I think the running world it's kind of like, I don't know, it's just like a different world. I think it's a different world. And because, when you work so hard in this sport, there's a kind of equality in it that is just there. It's there. And we're all covering the miles, and we're all sweating. And I think there's a different feeling than if you're living in a place where, there's been racial struggles and strife and everything, and that's gone on. And our sport is still a small sport. We still can't reach people the way we should reach people. Maybe we can do something like through Zoom and through the RCA. But to me, our sport should have more spokespeople of significance speaking up. And I know some of the athletes in other sports have spoken up, but they should speak up also in marathoning and also in track and field, So I think they are, I think people are role models when you reach the top, and you do well, and you got to put yourself on the line. You got to speak up. But when I saw that myself, it's like, what? Please.
It's like, that's why I think now's the perfect time for us to sort of build community, right? And reach out to the runners. And it's like, if you don't know how you can get involved in your community and helping prevent this sort of, violence from happening, reach out at a race. If you see African-American runners, if you see Black girls run or Black men run or Latinas in motion or something, go up to these minority groups and make friends with people and find out, is there anything that's going on in your community now? Like, what can I do to help?
Absolutely.
It's funny, when I
think the sport, I think the RCA is a big pusher for trying to involve people, from all races, religions, doesn't matter. Our sport is the ultimate sport that way. I think it really is. I mean,
well, Bill, you're absolutely right there, because I always maintain to people that, and I was a sports journalist for over 10 years, I don't think there's any sport in the world which is as inclusive and accepting as running just broadly as a sport, whether you're talking marathon running, park run, road races or whatever. I'm fortunate I do some work with Rob DiCostella's Indigenous Marathon Foundation here. And when I talk to his runners, this is Indigenous runners in a pretty discriminated, sadly for Australia, discriminated population in Australia. And I say to them, don't be scared about getting out there. These are people who don't have a running background. But I tell them, when you go to races, you will feel included, you will feel accepted, because that's just the running community. I know, Bill, we've spoken about that's one of our greatest loves for the sport and the running community, that it's a leveler. Everyone's just having to put one foot in front of the other. In the case of Paralympians, or the wheelchair guys, one wheel in front of the other. But everyone's got to put in the hard work, and it's such a level. And I think that's why it's so accepting. Ipso facto, that's why it's so tragic that,
When I was a kid,
Ahmad was out there doing what he loved.
Right.
Yeah. When I was a kid, Natalie, Vince, and Ian, when I was a junior in high school, 1 year into running, I saw Biba Bikila win the Olympic gold medal in the marathon, in 64, Tokyo. And when I went to Westland, I bumped into this white guy, Amby Burfoot. He looked just like Bikila. He's 6'1" and he's skinny, and he moves pretty damn smooth, And I said, so, I kind of, but of course I knew the history of the sport too. I knew about athletes in track and field and Jesse Owens and all the athletes from going back to Wilma Rudolph up to the current day. So I've always been a fan of the sport, and I knew about the Ethiopian runners going way back, the Kenyan runners and everything. I met Kip Kano once, the whole deal. So I knew what it was like, what it was about. But I think the struggle is really on a psychological side, and that's and the barriers and they can be real estate barriers, which become psychological, emotional barriers. But I do think 100% this sport, is the sport where the doors open. Doesn't matter how fast or slow you are, your religion. And that's what I loved about running. I loved it even more. But track and field was, I thought, sort of more tough sport. And to me, it was more, people were most friendly, and maybe it was less competitive or something. Or they were most friendly when you got on the road, because you shook hands. We all shook hands, so you weren't so nervous. It was a way of breaking the ice, and you all got to know each other, and I love that feeling to road racing. And when I meet people of different religions, I met people from all over the world. I've traveled all over the world. So don't, when you have that opportunity, and maybe that's where the World Marathon Majors comes in, and maybe you travel to Africa. I've raced in Africa. I raced in Morocco, world cross country. And so you get to meet people. I've met racing against Kenyan runners like Henry Orono, Joseph Nzao, Joseph Kameto, Samson Kamamba. So when you meet people, everything's different. But
well, that's the thing, and that's why it needs to be, now's the time we should seize on, and people need to make sure, because there are some races. I've had some things happen at races where people, it's been sort of a jarring. But those of us but that's the minority, right? So most of us do want to do good and do want to make the world a better place. So let's start with these conversations. Don't be shy to approach somebody,
Absolutely. I think you're right. And I think it's happening.
Yeah.
Runners
happening not only in the US, but around the world. And that's the best thing of all, because it kind of showcases the power of our sport. It's not a money sport so much. There's some out there, which is great, but it's more of the barrier breaking that this sport does. That's what the Olympic Games are about. And here we get to live that, all of us. But it was tragedy, and there's too many tragedies, really, I think, in the US all the time. That's the way I sort of have always felt my whole life. But very tough, very sad.
I think, some of the perspectives that you were bringing there, Natalie, where like just having to figure out what you're going to wear before you run, like that just says something there's still work to be done, as a society, that if you can't go outside feeling safe, there's obviously still something that has to be done.
Definitely. I mean, that's why there are not a lot of Black ultra runners, right? We have a deep-seated fear. It's like we're not running through the woods at night. You get seen by, you know what I mean? It's just not safe. It's not as safe, but it's weird. It's like that's changing slowly. There are a few more now, but it's like if you look in the marathon, sure, but if you look to ultras, there are very few. It's like I know a couple people have, Black people that run ultras, but not many.
Mhm.
But it's like we need to make it a safe space for everyone. You know, always it needs to be safe, and not just when we're running, just when we're living our lives.
You know, Natalie, I've talked with the folks, talked with Gary Corbett, you know, Ted Corbett's son,
Yeah.
you know, about bringing in Ted and Amy Burfitt at the Philadelphia Marathon, you know, because Ted Corbett won Philadelphia, I think more than any other guy, you know, and his success as an ultramarathoner, as a marathoner, as an athlete was just off the charts. I mean, he's just off the charts. But you know, the whole thing is, can we keep that knowledge alive and get the word out there? And Gary's got an excellent site. So I'm working with a coach in Philadelphia, Dave Thomas, who's a collegiate coach there, and he knows. There was a Jamaican guy that won Philly some years ago and everything, and bring Andy in and have them as speakers, you know. And so I think our sport is an icebreaker, and we really need to keep breaking the ice, because then everyone I mean, life is better. I mean, isn't that the goal?
Definitely.
That's the goal for everybody, and I think our sport really knows that. And I think you know, it's a sad thing to see, and a sad thing, you know. Now we've seen a lot of struggles, you know, recently, and it's tough. You know, can't really imagine.
Yeah.
I guess being a white guy, it's a different deal, you know, and you have a different perspective and everything, but you try to understand.
Well, it's like I had a lot of runner friends reach out and say, well, there's nothing I can do. I feel so helpless. And it's like, I don't think there's nothing you can do. You know, I definitely think there is something you can do. Use your voice. You know, we all have our voices, so even within our communities. It's funny because I sort of, when I was talking to Bart about this, I came up with like RACE, for Runners Action for Community Engagement. You know what I mean? It's like we can all do something. Like we just remember that while you're there, I'm at a race. Runners Action, community engagement. I can meet somebody, I can reach out, I can see what's happening in your community. Is there anything that's going on that I should know about, that you need help with, that I can help use my voice to? You know what I mean? How simple is that? Find one person and ask a question. Maybe they know, maybe they don't, you make a new friend.
And you know, I really think the top runners, the professional runners, should all speak up too. I mean, everyone has a voice. Political leaders should, and so should the athletes, and also the people with great wealth. You know, they have a responsibility, I think, you know, because
True.
You benefit really big time. So I think that, you know, maybe something really good will happen, and I think our sport can be a leader that way. You know, I was very lucky because, you know, when I broke through to an extent, and I won this race in New England called it was the New England 20K, and I got a free trip. I represented the U.S. in Puerto Rico at the San Juan. Well, I ran the San Juan 450, but also ran in Coamo, Puerto Rico. You know, I met people from Puerto Rico. There was the first time I had ever really experienced a trip like that. Meet runners from around the world there, you know, and raced Henry Rono there years later, you know, and so I think I had an advantage in a way, and so did Frank Shorter, and so did John Benoit Simpson. So we're kind of more relaxed or comfortable. It doesn't, you know, we had that great advantage, you know. Ted Corbett did the same thing, you know, and he traveled around the world competing in the Olympic Games, representing the U.S. So he could think different. And I just think, I don't know, we got to make some moves that are better. And I think when tragedies happen, and they happen in Australia too, Ian, then we learn from the tragedy. You got to learn from it. You got to learn from it, and then you got to build something good out of it. And then when we do that, then our sport is really one of the great sports. You know, that's what I think.
Well, this is one of the sad ironies of it, isn't it? Because runners are so accepting of other runners, as I was saying before. The general public embraces the African runners, and they have done for years, as you say, going back to B.B. Bakila. I mean, they dominate, you know, world marathon majors, the East African runners particularly. You know, the general public sit there on the sidelines or watch them on TV and applaud and are in awe of them. And the skin color or where they come from doesn't make any difference. So to me, that's the sad irony of it. We've been applauding them as athletes and competitors for years.
I think maybe, you know, it's still pretty new, this global World Marathon Majors thing and the visibility our sport's starting to get. Maybe it's going to become, I think it's going to only go up. You know, I've always believed this. I was a believer in this sport back in 1963, and I've always been a believer except for that one break, you know, and I was kind of knocked out of the sport, you know, but now we're all in it. So let's make it a bigger and better sport. That's the way I always have felt, you know.
Yep.
And very important.
Yeah. So Natalie, you know, like we did have a lot of runners in our group, you know, post the runs and stuff. But what is next step, or what do you recommend for these guys? I know that you were talking about, you know, reaching out to the Black Men Run and the Black Girls Run groups. What else?
Or even like on a smaller level, like I was saying, if you're at a community race and you see a runner of color there, go make friends, introduce yourself, get to know people, right? Like, and then you can find out, you can stay more in touch. You can find out if there's something in the community that needs action, that needs help, that needs support. You know, it's like you can, like I was saying, run as action for community engagement. It doesn't, you know, if you do it, that's how things grow, right? When you start with your community first, that's what you have access to. Yeah. If you don't see people, well, we're not seeing people at races for a while, but if you don't know someone in your community, if there's someone on a Facebook group, you know, reach out to me, reach out to whoever, and sort of find out, where can I best use my voice? How is my voice most useful at this time? Because sadly, there's, you know, always some other action happening. There's always something going.
Right. I remember the first time that I ran with you. Me, you, and Tim Moley ran in Central Park together.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I ever seen somebody get punched while they were running.
Yeah.
Somebody
hit you. Saying just random things.
Right.
Random person went by and hit me. It was just like, what is happening?
It was New York and it was Central Park. So.
And you're a native there. What do they do with tourists and visitors to New York? That makes me scared.
Get your battle gear on. Forget the mask. Get your full gear.
Right. Well, it is an important topic. It is something that we need to be more aware of. It is helpful, I think, for everybody to understand different perspectives. Like Bill was saying, you know, we have three white males here who don't know the perspective that the African American community goes through. We truly don't know. But it helps to have these conversations. It helps to go talk to these people at a race. It helps to just go run.
Definitely.
Go run. Yeah, just go run.
But like my nephew has started running. I got him running. He ran a few 5Ks with me when he was younger, and he's 15 now, so he looks like a man, and it's scary. It's scary to think of him going out, but he's always known that, you know. It's like you always have this sort of awareness of how people view you. So like I said, go up to people at a race, make friends. It's as simple as that. You know what I mean? Start the conversation, just start talking. It's like, it doesn't have to be this huge, big, grand gesture. Just something small. Start where you are. Start with what you know.
It's true. I see certain runners every year at some of the races I go to, you know, the African American community there in Philadelphia, and but around the country. And I think that there was an advantage because I've been road racing so long. So I have seen this. Natalie, you know, everyone gets along, you know, when we do the race, you know, we celebrate. It's a family and friends sport. But I think we have to break some barriers. One thing I think, you know, track and field is a lot of African Americans are in track and field. So it would be cool to see some more working together between some of the coaches on the road race side and the track and field side, you know? So it would be cool to see that happen more and more. You know, I go to the track meet in Boston at the Reggie Lewis Center, and I see, you know, people there, African Americans are there, runners from around the world are there competing, and so I think we all have a role to play, and I think you're right about this, Natalie, and Vince and Ian. So we all we can do is do our best. That's running. I mean, just do your best, you know, and keep trying. It's the name of the game. Keep trying.
Yeah, I don't think we've heard the end of this story yet, and I think it sounds like you're onto something with this race.
I think the world can be a lot better world than it is. That's my personal feeling. But I'm always one of these people who's always wondering what is going on.
Oh, I went to the United Nations school where everything was all lovey-dovey. So it's like I really live in a fantasy world. I have friends that are from everywhere that look like everything. It's like, I know it can be better. Like, we just cut it out, cut out the nonsense. Of course we can make it better.
I think we're in very tough political times, and that's part of the deal in the U.S. and even a little bit around the world here and there. But I think in the end, civilization is going to go to a better place. And we're supposed to be a leader, or one of the leaders here in the US of A. So at least runners, this little sport that didn't mean too much has a lot of power. That's the way I always believe, Yeah. So I believe the future is bright, Natalie.
Definitely. We can lead the change.
That's the way I always feel. When I go out for a run, I wave hi to everybody I meet. My daughter, Erica, she sometimes said to me, after daughters, I'm a dad and all that, and I love that. She says, Dad, you wave to everybody. We shouldn't be doing that. I said, back in the 70s, we waved to everybody on the run. Yeah. We just waved to everyone because it was so new to see another runner on the road, so many people. But I think, Natalie, you hit the nail on the head. And I think the tragedy is that there are incidents, some real brutality, some crazy things still happening.
Yep.
But I do think the vast majority of people don't want that. They don't want to see that, and they want to end it. And that's just the way that's what I believe, because if you don't, where are we going?
No, exactly. It's like, you have to have hope. And it's like humanity will shine through. We've just, maybe got to make it happen sooner.
Yeah. And us runners, we're kind of lucky because you get out there and your easy run, whatever, or a walk or a bike ride, whatever. We're lucky because we get that stabilization that running gives us. You feel very, very centered after a run. You feel more relaxed, we all do. I think that's why I really loved running. I was kind of a hyper ADHD kid. Today they would try to put me on medication. That's the way I was, but I became a runner, and it always kind of calmed me down. And I think that's what running is. This is ancient. We are meant to move. It's an overdone slogan, but we need to reach more people who don't think that way yet. It isn't so we got to drop the thing about race, religion, skin color. We got to believe more that let's all treat each other good. Then we got a good world. We got the best world. I think that's important.
100%. And Natalie, I don't think this is going to be the end of this conversation. I think you've got some plans, and if you can always count on the Boston Buddies to back you up. You obviously are one of the originals, one of the favorites here. So you can always count on us, and we're here. We'll open up that conversation, and we'll do whatever we can to help get this message out and whatever we need to do.
Nice.
And she's part of the Wesleyan group too.
Yes.
Another bunch of do-gooders.
That's what you used to call us. What's with your merry bunch of do-gooders?
Exactly.
Well,
so cool.
I think this was a good conversation. I thank you, Bill and Ian and Natalie to open up and talk about this. It's not always easy to talk about, and we can definitely do other sessions on this and make sure like this isn't the end of it. I don't want it to be like, okay, we all ran and posted a run, and that's it. That's not it. We gotta keep moving forward and make progress.
Mm.
Yeah.
But maybe just to segue into the transformation that running can provide to lives around the world, Bill, because you've seen and this with the African runners that I was alluding to before. When they come and win major road races, particularly the money that's around these days, they still, the vast majority still live in their African communities in Kenya and Ethiopia, particularly the towns of Iten and the Rift Valley, that famous Rift Valley area in Africa. They go back, and that money goes a long way. That sustains the community, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And they're, aside from being local heroes, that really transforms lives in their community.
That's true. And you know, I know that some various people, I think, I'm trying to think, Toby Tanzer and the New York Roadrunners Club has done a lot of fundraising to help build a hospital in Kenya. And so has um, Kenyan winner from 2012, the 86-degree day. I ran with him a little the day after the race, Wesley Career. His brother actually died of a cobra bite. So he had this drive to raise money, you know, build a hospital in Kenya, you know, and because he couldn't get his brother to a hospital in time, he died of a cobra bite. It's beyond belief. But I think our sport has this way to impact a lot of people and raise a lot of dollars too. I think that's the future, you know, down the road and everything. And but you're right. I think our sport is all about giving a chance to other young people, the kids. You know, really, it's about the kids and some of the new adults too. I mean, we can't say just because you're 50 years old or 60 years old, you shouldn't be out there. You know, our sport was a little bit like that, I think, in the past. You know, it wasn't really. I think it's better than ever, because our sport is one of the few where the door is open to age groups. Like you mentioned Gene Dykes, Vince, you know what I mean. And so I love seeing all that happen. So I think our sport has only positives in it. That's what I really believe. It is truly a welcoming sport, you know. Yeah. And I remember when I went to Australia and met some of the runners and people from Australia. It was such a mind-blowing trip. So to travel, to meet people from other countries, I think is a great honor, a great learning experience, you know. So I had that chance, you know, and I met Henry Rono. Later I read his book, you know, and how he felt when Kenya boycotted the Olympic Games. And then there was an African boycott in the 76 Games, you know, which is kind of a tough thing. Because the African athletes, maybe it was a good thing. It was probably a debatable issue by athlete and by country. But I remember Henry Rono, he never became known as well as, let's say, Lasse Viren of Finland did. He might have pushed Lassie, maybe beaten Lassie, maybe taken a gold medal, you know. So the individual athletes, who are they? Well, sometimes the individual athletes can play a big role in society. And we see that in other sports. And sometimes athletes they're very powerful. Once I met a professional basketball player, and he was fighting diabetes. And I used to work with the American Diabetes Association because I had some diabetes in my family. And I said, well, you know, I'm wondering, and he was there with someone from a pharmaceutical company. We were on a TV show. And I said, how come I don't see more pro athletes, you know, the really visible athletes, speaking up about heart disease and diabetes and the struggles that people live through? And I know about this stuff because I had a relative who died on the operating table from diabetes. So I said, because the agents, you know, and it's tough to get them out there and the money, you know, can they do it? I think a lot of people do. So I think we need to see more people. You know, that guy's name is Dominique Wilkins. I don't know if he played Philadelphia or where he played, you know, but a great athlete, you know. And so he told me a little bit about it. I think in this sport, it's more easy to be a spokesperson. And I think as the media and the agents get more involved, it's harder. Yeah. And sometimes you make mistakes. Wasn't there like a hockey player who made a mistake before this COVID-19 virus came on the scene? And he was playfully goofing around about it. And he didn't mean anything wrong, but he got beat up later, you know.
Yeah.
But Bill, you've used your running to promote so many causes, and I know prostate cancer was one that was important to you because you were diagnosed with prostate cancer yourself back, and you ran Boston. Was it 2009 or something like that as an awareness? That was your last Boston.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to run Boston when I was 6 years old, but then I got hit with prostate cancer that year. So I couldn't run that year, you know, and so I ran in 2009, my last Boston, and my last marathon. And I ran with a singlet of some company, some outfit, some organization. But there was nothing about it. It's like they totally ignored that. The media ignored it. No one asked me about it. Even the organization didn't ask me about it. So sometimes I'm a little like, You know, I've seen a lot of the fundraising go on, and I know the different angles to it. That's what I'll say. I know there's a lot of really good stuff, you know, Natalie, like you talked about and everything, and cancer research, you know, and I understand that all really, really well. I work with one of those groups, and I'm glad to do it, you know. I think all the runner athletes are, and so are all the other athletes in other sports. I'm sure they are, you know, but I know there's other sides to it too. Like I said, the agents, and who's making money and all that. I think there's stories there that we don't all know yet. And maybe as our sport continues to grow, we'll see more and more. But I think 99.9% of it's good, you know.
I agree. I've been fortunate enough to be, you know, having these interviews and brunch with Boston Buddies over the past 6 weeks during this lockdown with a lot of the great runners, Amby being one of them, Ron Tab, you know, Bob Hodge, like all the guys, and all the women, Jacqueline Grew, Catherine Switzer, Bobby Gibb, and all of them seem to have some sort of community involvement. They do some charity work. There's something that's driving runners that's not running. You know, there's always some sort of charity or raise awareness to something. And it's just, I don't see that in many other sports. I definitely don't talk to professionals in any other sports. I don't get to run in or play in the same sport as the professionals, except for running. And it just makes a big difference. Like they can do so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I see that more. I mean, we are seeing it more and more, like in football and the Patriots, the New England Patriots. I see them doing more. I see the hockey players doing, you know, visits to hospitals, visiting kids. You know, our sport's been doing that for 30 years, 40 years, stuff like that. So I think the other sports, those so-called pro sports, and, you know, I never saw a distinction. To me, I saw us, we're just athletes, you know, and they're not better than us and we're not better than them. We're all kind of equal. That's the way I saw it, but most people don't think that way. If you're on TV, you're a great athlete. If you're not on TV, you're not a great athlete. If you make a lot of money, you're a great athlete. If you're dirt poor like we marathoners were, well, you get out of the way. I'll talk to you later. So that's the way our sport was, but now it's a little better. And I love seeing
But Bill, that is one of the biggest transformations of running, isn't it, of the last 20 or 30 years? I know through my running career, you wouldn't have seen or heard of charity runners back in the 90s, but 2000 onwards, it makes it so much more accessible. It gives people a purpose. And probably sadly, with coming into the, you know, with Miss Boston coming into the prime road racing season, you know, a lot of charities are going to be suffering because a lot of runners just can't get to events and do what they love to do best, which is, you know, using their running for a purpose, using it for good. But it's certainly been a massive feature of the transformation and change of running, fun runs, marathons and road races for the last 20, 25 years.
Yeah, I still have that big billboard with me and Will Cloney, you know, run for MS, you know, to beat MS. And I get letters from people, you know, thanks for giving me a chance to run Boston and raise some dollars and all that. You know, it was just the first I ever heard of it, you know. And so I think our sport has done a great job. And I hope it will continue. I think it will continue that way. I think London Marathon has raised something like $100 million every year for different organizations. Boston raises about 40 million. I think New York raises 50 million. I mean, that's some real money. Now, if these road races can raise that, well, what can the football industry and the baseball industry and hockey and golf do? I suppose they already do a fair amount of stuff I don't know that much about what goes on behind the scenes in those sports, really, you know. But I think our sport, I think, is going to keep evolving in positive ways, you know, and I love seeing that. But I remember a time when this really wasn't welcomed with open arms. I remember with a time, for example, when wheelchair athletes weren't welcome at a certain marathon. And I knew Bobby Hall, the first wheelchair racer at Boston. He was in the Greater Boston Track Club. And I actually met a lawyer at a very large marathon who was fighting against it. So, you know, I've seen both sides of the deal, you know, and how the sport's changed, you know, and it's always been a great sport, and I think it always will be a great sport, you know, but I think, the COVID-19 thing is now we really got to work together more than ever. So I think it's good that you're doing the Zoom stuff, and, you know, the Boston Buddies, and have that contact, and Natalie, you know, and Ian, you know, we're going to have to get more of an international thing here. We need a Kenyan athlete, you know, and we do. And maybe Wesley Career, because he's one of the great speakers I've ever heard. He is a great speaker. And I was.
Well, he went on to be a
clinic
politician,
at
didn't he?
Richmond
Member of the
Senate.
Kenyan Parliament, I think, didn't he?
Yes, he became a member of Parliament, Kenya. But I heard him speak to the school kids, you know, in Boston. And they'd had Greg Meyer there, myself, John Burnett Samuelson, some of the Kenyans. And he talked about his brother, you know, and how he died, and, you know, how it's so serious. You know, he's going to try his hardest. You know, nothing going to stop him. And the kids just loved his talk. He was incredible. He was incredible. So I think we need more people to be speakers, you know, and you know, that was through John Hancock. And we used to go into the schools and meet the kids, and I wish there was more of that done, you know. And I know today the Kenyan runners and some of the other runners from other countries will go out to Hopkinton, and they meet the school kids. Yep. Kids are kids. They love runners, and they're fascinated by the runners from all over the world. You know, and I think that's our strength as a sport, is that we're international. You know what I mean? We're not just the U.S. We're not just Australia. We're not just one country or another. We're a sport that's global. How many sports are global? Well, there's running and there's soccer, really, I think. That's the way I've always thought of it, you know? Yeah. So I think we've been lucky, you know, in our own ways. We can all kind of say what we believe, you know, but there is still some tough stuff we got to deal with, you know.
Bill, speaking of the African runners and events of the last couple of years, what did you think when Eliud Kipchoge became the first man to run sub 2 hours? We all know that there were some concerns around the artificiality of it, but what were your thoughts as a purist and a veteran?
Well, you know, I don't know that I'm a purist, but I am sort of, because I'm older and I came from those days back in the 60s and 70s when things were much less developed in the sport. You know, and but at the same time, the sport's still the same. You know, but I think we all knew that the Kenyans were great runners, and I raced against a lot of the Kenyans, and some of the Ethiopians as well. You know, but I remember when Tom Fleming, my old buddy there from New York City, New Jersey area, someone was talking about running 206. Tom said, "Oh, I've got a 206 body." I thought, you're crazy, you know. And but he's a funny guy, he had a great sense of humor. But I think, you know, the psychological part of our sport is the final frontier. It is for everything. You know, how do you think? You know, can you think beyond? And I think Eliud Kipchoge is kind of he's a very tough guy, you know, and he wants to win and he wants to be the best. And so that's what he does. And he makes a point of doing it. So I think he, but the 2 hour barrier is a very interesting thing. You know, he's getting close in a real marathon on a course. I think there is a difference when you're competing. One of the tricky things is today we have pacers. In my era, there weren't pacers, you know. So you have pacers and so forth, more advanced training and all that. So this is inevitable that times will fall. Look at the times for women too, how they have fallen, you know, tremendously. And those times will keep falling too. But I think Eliud is an interesting story. You know, he's a guy, he was like Ron Clark of Australia, you know, who said, you know, he set like 20 world records. And there are always people from every country who say, or the guy who came in from Greece, Karakides, when his country was beaten in World War II, so poorly beaten up, and he came and he won Boston, and then went on a national tour in the U.S. and raised millions of dollars to help the Greek people. So that's really what our sport is about. You know, there's the competitive side, but there's the camaraderie side, and they're both very powerful. But to run under 201 or something like that, 202 marathon, no, I couldn't think of it. But I think there's huge changes going on. The exercise science, I think altitude birth is a huge factor. Most of the top runners in the world are born at altitude, including quite a few of our Americans, you know. Most people don't know these things, but have been involved with the sport forever. Now you've got some born at sea level, like Deke, who became a world champion, you know, in '83, ran a 2:07 marathon. But I truly believe very tough to be born sea level and go up against the altitude born athletes. I think very, very tough. And that and the money are what changed. There is some doping in the sport, and athletes have been caught, here and there. And it's a good thing, because I'm a big believer in just use your mind and your body and do your best. And it doesn't matter if you're a 6-hour marathoner or a 2:10 marathoner, where you're at, So our sport has growing pains too. But our sport, we have a great leader in Sebastian Coe, a world athletics leader, Olympic gold medalist. He's just doing a great job. I think our sport is a world leader. Our sport is much tougher than the sports that are called professional sports a lot of times in dealing with doping. Much tougher, which is great, because who are the real world record holders? Who's really the best in the world? Sometimes someone crosses the line. In fact, it has been said that many of the world records in track and field are not real records, So Coe is looking at this, and we got to look at it, because we got to have the real champions, not someone who, took the gold or something, or took a lot of money and maybe they were doping, I think most of the professional athletes are clean. They're just really good people, and they're really tough. And boy, do they work hard. I work pretty hard as a runner, but the runners today have to work harder than ever. And they're as good as any other athlete in the US or anywhere in the world, I think. They truly, truly are. I've read the books, I'm always reading about the sport, or, reading about Meb, reading about Dana Castor, Shalane Flanagan, Kipchoge, the Kenyans, the camps. Lorna Kiplagat invited me to her camp in Kenya, some years back and everything. So it's been a great experience to meet the international runners and to learn from them. And
yeah, we had Greg Meyer on the other day, and he was talking about just being coached by Billy Squires, and he wasn't taught, or he didn't teach you guys to run for a specific time. It was to race and to compete and race.
Yeah, it was different.
Person. And you guys ran a lot more races that you guys would run multiple marathons.
Yeah.
It's unheard of these days. But
yes.
It seems like it worked. Like, what do you think the difference is?
The marathoners today, they don't really know that much history. They don't know about the Association of Road Racing Athletes and how they're making so much money today. Mm-hmm. They don't know about that. So we talked about that a little bit. Maybe some of them do. I'm not sure. But I think it's true. Today, everything is shoe company based, and the money is in the shoe companies, and the athletes have to have a shoe deal to make a living. It's tough on the roads. Can you make a living? Well, maybe. And how long do you have a high level life, as an athlete in this sport? Maybe one of the ultimate tough sports in the world, And some athletes have lasted longer than ever. I mean, Meb has been a phenom. He's just lasted forever. But he's had great support. The same is true for Shalane Flanagan and Dina Castor, Years ago, there wasn't such good support. I remember when I had a foot injury and I was at the U.S. Olympics in Montreal, and I went in to talk to them, and they said, well, just go sit in a whirlpool. And that was the state of the art of physical therapy in those days, So we really didn't know how. Today, everyone has more access to better physical therapy, so people can benefit. So the athletes are better and better coaching, better knowledge of coaching. But the money is so big today and such an inducement that there is going to be some cheating. And that's a tough thing. I mean, a Boston marathoner and a New York City marathoner who were drug cheats have been caught. So this is the tough side of our sport that we got to look at. But I think Eliot is a cool dude. I like his courage, and he's off the charts. I like to see him race, because I recently, my girlfriend and I watched the Rio, when he was racing Galen Rupp and an Ethiopian guy. And the Ethiopian guy, I remember he crossed the line, he put his hands up, because in Ethiopia, it was tough. It wasn't about his race, it was about his tribe. So that was a tough barrier. That's what he was trying to send a message about. Do you know what I'm saying to you? I'm saying the athletes are always trying to send a message. I mean, Natalie, you did, and Vince, you did, and Ian, you do, and I have too. So I think we all try, but I don't know, the athletes are trying to do the right thing, I think. But why do we always run into roadblocks?
Yeah.
Well,
You're
lots of great stories there, Bill.
Yes.
Just lastly, Bill, any last bit of advice for all the everyday road warriors out there, everyone who slogs
Yeah.
out there, and
You
you're
know,
still
the
out there
thing I
running
always
as
think of
well.
is when I
What's
see
your
beginner runners, and I'm
final
seeing a
bit of
lot of them.
advice?
Final bit of advice? I don't know. I think back to when I was a kid running with Charlie and Jason. You know, just run for fun. If you run for fun and with your friends or your family, you're going to keep running and running. Because this sport is priceless. You know, this activity, just being out there, is priceless. You know, you can't put a dollar figure on it or something. So I think if you have fun with it, by hook or by crook, whether it's the shoes you wear, you know, what you do, you know, the fundraising you do, like you did, Natalie, you know, or with Boston Buddies, find your team. This is a sport with your friends. You know, that's everything. You know, Greg Meyer, he came to Boston, he pretended to be my friend, and then he crushed me in the Boston Marathon.
That's great. No, I appreciate everybody's time here today. Again, it was a good topic. It was good conversation. I think these are conversations that need to be had. And Bill, I certainly appreciate your time. You're a legend. You're welcome back anytime. I'm sure you've got a million stories that you could tell us. We'd love to have you back. Your Boston buddies absolutely love you.
Thank you so much, Vince. And Natalie, great to meet you.
You too.
Wesleyan.
Pleasure to
Go
meet you.
West, right?
Yep, go Cardinals.
Absolutely. The Cardinals. The Cardinals. I'm always a fan of the Cardinals. And Ian, you do such great work, you know, in running and bringing that runner Zibion to the Boston Marathon was incredible. He was tough as
Yeah,
nails. And
Rob
so were you. I'm glad I
Dickerstell's
wasn't
charity is
running
changing
one of
lives down here. So, yeah, we're doing our own transformational stuff. Anyway, great to be part of it.
Yes, thank you.
Run forever. Let's run forever, as you say, Bill. Your famous
Thumbs up.
saying, let's run forever.
Yes, run forever.
I like
You got to
it.
do it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you on the
Take care.
roads and the trails.
Take good care. Thanks. Bye.